All right, we'll get going in about a minute. About a minute. If you want some treats or coffee or water. Actually, why don't we get going now? It is a minute after 6:30. So, welcome everybody to Doing Life with Your Adult Children. We believe that no matter what stage in that phase of life you're in, whether you have young kids yet and you're not even thinking young adults, or whether you are grandparents and your kids have been out of the house for 10 or 20 years, we believe that there's something here for everybody, and we are excited about this teaching. So, just a quick introduction. My name is Rieck. This is my wife, Carrie. We've been married 25 years. We have got a 21-year-old son, David, who's a junior at UWSP, a 20-year-old son, Josh, who's a sophomore at University of Wyoming, and our daughter, Abby, turns 16 tomorrow. So, Lord have mercy. But that's kind of, that is who we are. And what we want to do is start out with a question to get you guys thinking before we present any information. Carrie has a question for you. We are interested in your answers here.
All right, thinking back to when you were an adolescent, how do you think that your parents did transitioning you from being an adolescent to an adult?
So let's hear.
So raise your hand and I'll call on you, and Emmaus will give you the mic, and whoever wants to share.
Emmaus,
Tamara, did you raise your hand?
Yep.
Was that?
Go ahead.
Okay, Tamara.
Actually, I think they did terrible.
Okay, very good.
I didn't know anything, and I went from graduating, if you will. I graduated early, and then I was working, but then I went from living in my house to being married, and I don't even think I could boil water. I knew how to do pancakes, but that was about it.
Okay.
So, nice.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Anyone else? How do you think your parents do it? Doug, Emmaus, you want to give Doug here the...
Doug Rogenbauer?
Again, this is Facebook Live, so we do want to get it.
Yeah, we want the comments.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my parents did terrible too. I was a middle child.
Mm-hmm.
I had free reign. They actually even gave me a vehicle. And yeah, I could not believe the stuff I got away with. I would not let my kids do half the stuff I did.
Okay, very good,
Okay.
very good.
Good.
Over here?
Liz?
Liz?
I think my parents did pretty good. I was really prepared to be an adult. My mom made sure we knew how to cook, how to do our laundry, how to be on our own, how to budget. So, I mean, we were homeschooled, so I think that made a difference, and she was more aware of that and very involved in our becoming adults. That was their goal, to make us effective adults. So, for the most part,
Good.
not that I know at
Okay.
all, but
Maybe one or two more, and then we'll get going. Anybody else want to share how they think? Yep. Right over here.
We have a handsome young adult walking around.
Right there
handing
first,
the
right there
microphone to all
first,
these
and then
adults.
Nova. Then we'll get moving.
I think my parents did pretty well. They gave me my brother and I, lots of responsibility and lots of freedom. I was a latchkey kid before it was popular with two working parents. I think spiritually it was a disaster because they didn't give any direction.
Okay.
But in a lot of ways they did well with the balance of responsibility and freedom. You know what was expected, and doggone it, we did it.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And lastly, up here, Nova, and then we'll...
I think that my parents did the best that they could, but I think that I just remember them being mad all the time, being disappointed, and I feel like I don't want to be that way with my kids. So I think as far as like training me up or whatever, I knew how to do stuff. I just they didn't like me, it seemed. So that's what I would change, I guess.
Okay, all right, well, good. Well, we just wanted to get a feel for, we just wanted you thinking along those lines, and then we think we have that this author has some great information that will help us. Well, there's quite a bit of good news tonight. Raising young adults, doing life with young adults is not always easy, but there's a lot of good news. The first bit of good news I'm going to share with you is that almost all young adults turn into responsible, independent, healthy adults. And so we have that going for us, and because you're here tonight, that makes it probably even greater that your young adults or your future young adults will turn into independent, healthy, loving, caring adults. And so that is one of the things I think just get in a mindset for. That's the first piece of good news, is that sometimes things seem dire, but it doesn't have to be, and it probably won't end up that way. Well, before we get into the teaching, I just want to open up in prayer. And Heavenly Father, Lord, I do pray, and I thank you for this opportunity, Lord, to take this teaching, Lord, that Jim Burns has put out in his book, Lord, and to bring that to your people today. Lord, I pray that you would open our minds, that these ideas and concepts, Lord, that they would be meaningful to us, and Lord, that we could all take away something, Lord, to help in our home, help in our family. Lord, we desire to leave a good legacy for our children. We desire for our children to be independent, healthy, and loving you, following your Son, Jesus Christ. So be with us tonight. Guide our discussion in Jesus' name. Amen.
Before we get started, I saw a few people come in. Does everybody have a packet that looks like this? There were some new people that came in. If you don't, raise your hand. Emmaus has them right there. He can give you one.
Okay.
All right, perfect.
All right. So what we're going to be talking about tonight is doing life with your adult children. And for most people, if we started out, you start your family, and mom and dad are in charge, and you're just sort of setting the tone, setting the role, and here's just a rough trajectory of how your family might be doing. So you raise your kids. If you have both parents, maybe dad setting the vision, you're heading in a certain direction, mom and dad are co-leading, and your family is coming along. We might have some interruptions along the line. Some days it's nice and straight, but we're heading in a certain direction. So in our family, that's kind of how it was. God was merciful. We didn't take many calls, or any calls from the principal that I remember. One call from a sheriff's deputy. I found out how fast our car goes down Highway 10 when I'm not driving it, but praise God, it never got any worse than that. So we were on this trajectory. We felt we had a really good handle on parenting, on life. We had 18 years in. We raised them to that point. They were somewhat independent. They were healthy. Our boys were alive. And we felt that we really knew what we were doing, and we were just going to sort of glide into or coast into this young adult phase because it's going to be a whole lot easier. Well, right. What we found was at about 2.5 years ago, our oldest, David, he went to college, but he stayed at home. And for the first time in our married life, Carrie and I were at a point of crisis with parenting. And what I mean by that is nothing we did worked, and we really had no idea what to do, but we were probably too either self-confident, proud, whatever it is, to ask anybody who had gone through it what they did and how they handled situations. So in a very short time, our family, we started having one of them start doing his own thing and going his own way. And that really affected everything in our house. And so, as God would have it, though, he provides people, resources, divine appointments if you're seeking him, if you're crying out, he will often do this. And what he did for us, sometimes it's a word, it's a sermon from Pastor Thompson, Pastor Casey. Maybe you hear the right thing at the right time. That's exactly what I needed. Well, for us, about 2 years ago, about half a year into this mini crisis in our family, we heard on Focus on the Family radio station this teaching by Jim Burns. It was doing life with your adult children. And instantly, I knew that this was what I needed. Otherwise, our family trajectory, we were going to be having all sorts of arrows going in all sorts of directions, and it was going to take away from what we had already established. We spent 18 years doing something, and we saw how quickly that can be eroded if we do the next number of years differently. So instead of having, and then when my next kid doing one of these, and now we're all over the place, the idea that we want, because they're going to go their own way for sure, but what we want is more parallel. We want them living their own lives, but going in the same direction so we can do life together, but instead of being behind mom and dad and doing everything, we want to do life together, but we want them heading in a general direction, not completely going the opposite way, in fact, going backwards or stuff like that. And so we found this to be extremely helpful, and we hope it will be for you too. So I said there was good news. The second good news that I have for you tonight is actually the first point. So the author divides it into 6 principles. About 90% of this is him, and about 10% of this is Carrie and I. He divides it into 6 principles, or 9, and we're going to cover 6 of them tonight. The first principle that we're going to cover is, second piece of good news is that you are fired. And that's the first thing on your sheet here. Your role as a parent must change. You are fired. So you spent 18 years raising these kids, bringing them into adulthood, whether they go off to school, to college, to the military, whatever it is, your role from that point on changes drastically. And what we need to do, the first thing we need to do is we do need to identify our old job description, because when we identify what we are doing, we can actually point out that it is over, that job description is over. So your job description bringing up kids would be you're the provider, you're the caretaker, you nurture, control, right? We love to control things. I did. I love to control the schedule. And it's very difficult to, you can go back one slide actually, please. Go back one slide, very good. So we have to identify and be aware of what our old job description was so that we can move into the new. But if we don't make that distinct break, it's harder to move into our new job description. So we have to reinvent the relationship with our kids at that point. So we identify what our old job description is. Again, it's that provider, caretaker, nurturer, protector, and the one in control of the schedule. All right, now on to the new job description.
Okay, so following along on your outline, and we'll also kind of following up here. Your new job description starts all over again. You still get to keep loving your child, so that's awesome. But in a nutshell, in order to get going on your new job, to even get the wheels turning, you need to come to this realization that in order for your child to become a healthy adult, you have to let go of them. You absolutely have to let go of them. You have to let go of the dreams you had for them. You have to let go of all the ideas that you have of what they need to be doing with their time and with their friends, and you have to be able to let go of them. So that is the very, very, very key point of your new job description, is letting go. The sooner you can embrace that, the easier it will be for everybody, especially if you're a control freak. It's important that you let the control go and you no longer are in control of your life. So independence is the primary goal that we want our child to have. So what that means is they're going to be fully responsible for their finances, their actions, their relationships, their growth, and their development, both physically and spiritually. The ultimate goal is that they are responsible for all of it. You are no longer responsible for their decisions. They are. So that's the ultimate goal. It's definitely a transition period, and many times it can start around age 14, 15, 16, as you slowly start to release and give them more things to be in charge of. It's easier to let them go when they hit that 18 mark and they're going off to college or whatever. So the more you can give them when they're younger, that you can trust them with, the easier it will be, because then you have this relationship. You're able to trust them with things, because really, honestly, it was like a light switch From the time, as soon as our kids went to college, it was like they no longer wanted us in their lives. Like, it was like night and day. It was crazy. So just want to keep that in mind. So, 4 key points that you want to focus on, and I've got them up here too, as you are going into your new job description. Number 1 is you want to be encouraging but not intrusive. So I'm just going to kind of briefly touch on these, and you're going to find that as we go through these notes, there's going to be some things that are going to be repeated a little bit, but we'll try not to be too redundant because that's kind of how he covers it in the book. So encouraging but not intrusive. Intrusive means you're inserting yourself into their life in ways that they don't want you there. So the best thing to do, and this is just going to be a brief, is to hold your tongue and look at the things you can affirm them in and encourage them in. Like, the less you can say, the better. The second thing, you want to be caring but not enabling dependency. Some parents keep tight reins on their kids because they unknowingly struggle with being needed. Or other parents just love helping out. So we need to be able to push through that, because either way, the longer your kids are dependent upon you, the longer it's going to take them to become a healthy, responsible adult. So they can't be dependent upon you. So the sooner you can break those ties, the better. The third thing, taking the time to invest in yourself. Emotional, physical, and spiritual health. This can become especially true when you've got young adults or adults that are making not so awesome decisions. Because you can spend all of your energy worrying about and caring for your adult child. If you spend too much time doing that, you're going to be totally depleted yourself. So, and if any of you have young adults out there or adult children that aren't making the greatest decisions, it can be so exhausting because you're worrying about them all the time. So it's so important that you don't spend all your time doing that. So imagine you've got a fire and you're not adding logs to it, eventually becomes a pile of ashes. That's what we become if we don't add good things into our life, if we don't take care of ourselves in all those aspects. So taking care of yourself, and I know I have a problem with this, is thinking it's selfish. It's not. It's not selfish to take care of yourself. You have to be able to take care of yourself, because if you want to be able to have energy to grow this new relationship with your adult child, you need to be healthy when you're doing it. And such as, what's that? Yep. And so, and then you also want to be intentional about spending time with people you enjoy, doing activities that fill you, and of course spending time with God. It's a good time to draw close to God and all that. So you definitely want to take care of yourself in every part. So as the flight attendant generally says, if you need oxygen, put mask on yourself first and then help your child. So it's so important. So, and then the fourth thing is always my favorite, because I'm fun country, is having serious fun. So one of the greatest benefits of moving from a parent-child relationship to an adult relationship is you actually get to be their friend now, and it can actually be a deeper friendship. And one of the strongest elements of friendship is actually having fun together. So studies have shown that families that play together stay together, and it's true. It's a common denominator across the board. So just think about some of the things your young adults like to do, whether it's golfing, going out to eat, doing those sorts of things, and spend time doing that. So make initiating fun part of your new job description.
Okay, thank you, Carrie.
Yep.
I would just add to that, they'll want to, your young adults will want to spend time with you if you're not trying to control their time. So the less controlling we were doing, the more time they wanted to spend with us. The more we tried to control, the more they pushed back. So, all right, thank you. And then the third and final thing on the principle one, that your role as a parent must change, is that, go ahead, put that up there. We really want to leave an impactful legacy. So a legacy is something transmitted or received from an ancestor or a predecessor. So what we really want to do, we need to keep, this is the goal that we need to keep in mind, is that we want our kids, by watching our actions, they know our values, by the way we handle ourselves. We want to leave that with them. And we could work 18 years at getting a legacy started, and we could, if we don't transition well, we're going to really set them back a long time. I just want to share, one way God speaks to me, and when I'm really struggling, I get dreams and visions sometimes, and I'm so thankful for that. And one thing I was doing with this here, this is our second son, Josh. I think it would apply, it probably applies to somebody here, but our second son, Josh, at the same time we were struggling with our oldest, who was in college. Josh was a senior, and he told us that he wanted to go to Wyoming. And I was really resisting that because it was 1,000 miles away, and it just seemed like, he's gone then. He's just gone, and he could learn engineering at Platteville or Madison, but he didn't have to go to Wyoming. And so I was about to start the wrong arrow with Josh. The arrow was already off with David, and I was ready to start launching Josh off in the wrong direction. And he knew it. There was tension between us, and up till then he had been almost, he had been the easiest one that we raised. And so I got this dream, and I was dreaming, Josh and I were on top of a train car, like in old Western movies, where the train's going through the mountains, and there's people running on top and jumping from car to car. And then we were running, Josh was running in front of me, and I was chasing him. And we were running, and I got to the very back of the train, and I finally caught up to him. And he turned and looked at me, and I looked at him, and he jumped off the train down into just nowhere. It was just treetops around us. It was mountainous. And I woke up like in the movies, like in a cold, just deadbolt, just awake. And God spoke to me. It wasn't audible, but it was as clear as a bell, is that if I don't let him go, I will lose all influence I have with him. That he will leave. He's leaving, so get used to that. But if I don't let him go, my influence over him is gone. And so the next day, I told Josh about that dream, and that really saved our relationship because I was going to fight him, and I was going to be resentful, and I was going to make sure he knew that he could learn engineering at Platteville. Again and again, but thank God. So they're going to go. If they've got a dream and you believe that they have, hopefully they've heard from God, but whatever they're going to do, they're going to probably go at that time. And I hope that helps somebody. But the idea is that it's what we want to leave is an impactful legacy. We don't want, so I guess what we'd like to do after each of the 6 principles, we want to open up to questions. And because we want to keep this as much dialogue, not so much just a discussion. And any time that anybody has a question, please interrupt us. This is meant to be as interactive as possible. So any questions on what we've covered so far? Yes. Let me see your speed on this one, Emmaus. I want to, go ahead. So we're going to have to get through the next one a little faster.
So this all starts as soon as they turn 18, even if they're not graduated yet? Like if there's like a year behind in school or whatever? Just saying.
Roughly. I mean, 18 isn't an exact number, but believe me, when they turn 18, even if they're in school yet, something wells up in them and they say, I'm independent, Mom, I'm independent, Dad. It's a natural thing. It's a God-born thing. In fact, it's a healthy thing, too. Pastor Casey in the back.
Did you find it hard juggling the old job description with one kid while exercising the new job description with the older kids? Because that'll be me in just a couple years.
Yeah. I would, go ahead.
Honestly, I think Abby's got it easy now because I probably give her a lot more freedom than what we probably did our first and second.
Yeah.
So that's what I think. I actually think it's easier because I'm totally conditioned to and Abby's more responsible too, so it's easier. Now, if I had some really irresponsible young boy coming up behind, it might not be the same, but for us, it's probably easier just because Abby's a girl.
And I would say no, too, because we're so used to the other job description that it's not any big deal.
Yeah.
Real quick right here, Emmaus. There we go. Thank you. You're a fine young man.
Getting your workout in. So when you had the arrows on there and you were like, okay, well, my first son's really going over here and the second son was really going over here, what does that necessarily entail? Because when Nova and I got to be adults,
So
Yeah.
just going through the points of conversations versus lectures, if you want to refer to your packet there, just some parallel, so just some comparisons. You want to do more listening and reflecting on what they're saying versus you doing most of the talking. The dialogue should be friendly. You shouldn't be raising your voice like you're angry at them. The tone of your voice should be good and not bad, and that can sound like all sorts of different things. Brian, like Brian had said before, you want to ask more questions versus saying, you know, you really should do this. You're better off saying something like, well, what do you think we should do? What do you think would be the best thing to do in this situation, rather than just telling them? So you want to get their brain engaged and thinking. And like Brian had said as well, also ask if they want input. Don't just give advice without asking, because, and like this just happened the other night, like there's something that Brian and I really want to talk to David about, but it's really like his decision. And so Brian's like, I'm just going to ask him. Like, we're literally experimenting. I'm just going to ask him when he comes home, because he comes in and out, and Brian's like, David, do you just want to sit down for a little bit and just maybe weigh out these couple jobs that you're looking at this summer and gas mileage and what it's all going to cost? And David's like, nah, I don't know, maybe I'll do it on my own later. And then he walked out the front door, and I'm like, but we just had to let it go because it's his decision. It's like, but we tried it, and David just said, no, I don't want to talk about it, and he left. And so that's just, okay, it's David's life. He's 21, what are we going to do? So, Heidi.
Mike Man?
I have a question. I think that's really neat. You've got mentor and coach up above. So this has been a question that's been in my mind for a while. Is the ultimate goal, like I'm thinking like 10, 20 years down the road, and I expect you to have grandkids, do you think that your son or daughter is on kind of the same quote unquote like level with you and you're just friends, or you always hold this role that you're somebody that they can look up to or ask things about? Because I know in my relationship with my parents, we've went to them sometimes for wisdom, and I don't know if that's...
Yep,
Anyway.
So my final point on that, actually I didn't get to it yet, but if you can work on building a positive relationship with your child, you will earn their trust, and you will earn the right to be heard as well. And then having that good friend-to-friend relationship is really what you want to have. You want them to say, Mom, you know, I'm having troubles with this. What do you think? Do you know, that kind of thing? Or Dad, I just don't know what to do. You want them to actually come to you. So ultimately, the day your young adult comes to you and says, I just don't know what to do. What do you think, Dad? It would be like, oh, hallelujah. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's really what you want. And I think we get some of that from Josh. Not a whole lot, but Josh, I think, has transitioned easier because he just, boop, he punched out and he's gone, and we FaceTime him once a week, and he's doing great. Whereas David, he stops home 3 times a week and wants nothing to do with what we think about anything. And I think it's because, like Brian said, it's very natural that they want to be gone. Like, they want to be disconnected. That's super natural. And so that resistance is actually, it's normal. And so David, the more he's home, the more he doesn't want to hear what we have to say. And Josh, so we talk to him so few, he likes to hear what we have to say.
So the friend-to-friend thing is still, I mean, I'm still going to always be the dad, just like my dad he is my dad, and so I totally respect him, and so yeah, but I'm friends with my dad, and but he's always my dad. So we're not on a level playing field, but yet we're not parent-child anymore. I mean, I'm not really my dad's little, 52. I'm not, you know what? So, yeah. So, but really, we want that with their 20-some years too. So it's not going to be a level playing field. It's not going to be level. Yeah. Yep. Okay. All right. I think you're done with that, right?
I am.
Okay. And then the last point would be your words have the. Oh, do we have another one?
Yep, there
oh,
it is.
I'm sorry. Mayas, you just interrupt me, okay? I didn't see.
You gave a really good example of when you were holding your tongues, but could you think of a time when you didn't and it backfired? It didn't go so well, maybe?
Oh, for a year. I mean, when somebody's in college and there's an exam tomorrow and you think you have the right because you're helping pay for the bills, and then you say, well, why are you not studying or whatever? Well, that just made it worse. So yeah, that would be one example when I knew what the schedule was and I would have done it differently.
But it's interesting because our son David is actually very observant. He's goofy, but he's observant. So if Brian says something like that, he'll literally look at Brian and say, do you know you telling me that doesn't make me want to study anymore.
Yeah.
It actually makes me want to do less, Dad.
Yeah.
So David will literally say that to Brian. And I'm like, oh, he's like so good. You know what I mean? Because he's literally saying what we need to hear. And a lot of young adults probably wouldn't do that. They'd just slam the door and walk out. So David, I think, really wants to keep that relationship good, so he's sharing that with us.
It is very good right now, actually, but it was a 2-year walk back to where we had it. So, anything else before we? Okay, then the fourth point, and I'll try looking around, is your words have the power to bless and to curse. So, I was going to move this. So, these are some scriptures that go along with what we're going to be covering. So, James 3:10, and I think for time's sake, I will read James 3:10. Out of the same mouth proceeds blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not to be so. And then Proverbs 18:21. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit. So that is really, those who love it will eat its fruit. So what kind of fruit do you want to eat? Do you want to eat good fruit, or do you want to eat bitter, sour fruit? Because it is up to you. Death and life, power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit. So we have decided that we want to eat good fruit. We want good fruit in our family, and we have curtailed how we speak to our kids. So your words have the power to bless and to curse. Keep those in mind. When you're speaking to them, ask open-ended questions. Come at them without an agenda. Of course, we have an agenda, but we are asking open-ended questions. And then, lastly on this one, come at them with the attitude of grace. We shouldn't assume that if they're acting wrong, they're doing it to be malicious or they're doing it for a bad purpose. So we have been given unmerited grace. We're all here tonight. Jesus has blessed us all with unmerited favor, and we need to pass that on to our kids. We shouldn't be more judgmental to our own kids than the Lord is to us. So just consider that with your words. Just when they get to that age, we just have to pour out grace on them. All right. Yeah, we don't say I told you so even if you can.
Nope.
Even if you could.
Not allowed to do that.
Even if you can. Any questions on this one? Unsolicited advice is usually taken as criticism. Any questions on this? I'll ask one question. Actually, could you ask one question?
Sure. Do you have a preference?
Nope. First one.
Okay. In what ways, if any, has experience been a better teacher than advice in your life? And how have you used or struggled to use this principle in relation to your adult child? Okay, I'll read it again, because that's a lot. In what ways, if any, has experience been a better teacher than advice in your life? And how have you used or struggled to use this same principle in relation to your adult child?
So a while ago, I got into a whole bunch of debt. And my dad, when I was a young adult, like 17, is just like, yeah, don't really ever use credit cards, just pay cash for stuff. Things will be better. And then I didn't do it. And I had a whole bunch of debt, and I dug my way out of it. And he told me, and that could have been an I told you so, but sometimes you just need to go out, the stove is hot.
Okay, very good. Any other? All right, well, let's move on. That's probably good. Let's move on to principle 3.
Okay, number 1.
You can't ignore your child's culture.
No, you cannot. And one thing I'm going to tell you is your kids even though they're in your house your entire life, they were not raised in the same culture as you. Okay, we were never home quarantined for a year with COVID. Okay, that's for one. We didn't have phones in our face half the day. So there's so many different things that happened in their childhood and in their growing years and in their adult years that we never experienced. And so if we expect them to be just like us, you are just like dead wrong, because our experiences make who we are. And so we have to be able to, we can't ignore the culture that they're being raised in. Though we try to control it as much as we can, you just can't ignore it. And so I just want to briefly look at some of the differences in the culture from even us to what the young adults are being raised in today. So for one, I already talked about the being shaped by technology. So as a parent of an adult child, if you're not good with technology and you want to communicate with them, you better get savvy with it, because that's how they communicate. I am literally on Snapchat because that's literally how my kids communicate. I do not really know what I'm doing on it half the time, but at least I know how to send a message, because that's the best way to communicate.
Sarah, could we get on point 1 and 2? Oh, very good, thank you.
Oh yeah, thanks. The other one is, you guys have probably heard this before, a lot of the kids now that are young adults, emerging adults, many of them were raised getting a blue ribbon for anything, for participation, for showing up, for wearing your uniform, everything. And so it started out as an opportunity to help boost self-esteem. That's kind of what the intention was good, but it turned out being kids with almost too much self-esteem, and they're actually entitled now to everything. And so you'll find that a lot of young adults today actually will expect like really high pay right off the bat, because without doing anything, because they're just entitled to it. So it's nothing that you many times can change. It's just the way they are, so you gotta like just be able to accept that. They don't live to work, they work to live, okay? Our grandparents, they worked hard all the time. As a matter of fact, their work probably interfered with their relationships because they were working all the time. Well, these new emerging adults, they like to live. And they're not excited about the 9-to-5 job. They are not excited at all about staying at one job. Many times they won't be loyal to that one employer. They actually will go through multiple jobs, because they're just not, they're not committed like our grandparents were, and even like we were. I mean, I'm sure a lot of us in here, we probably had the same job for a lot of years. The young adults today, they're not. There may be some that are out there like that, but it's very common that they're not. They are determined to not let work dominate their lives. That's like in a nutshell as far as work goes for them. And I don't like to staple that on everybody, but in general. So if you have that going on with your young adult, it's kind of a common thing because of the way their culture, brought them up. So next thing is they want to have a healthy marriage and family. So those who finally do decide to get married, they actually do want a healthy marriage and family, which might be one of the reasons why they're waiting so long to get married, because kids nowadays are waiting longer and longer and longer. The other thing is they prioritize adventure seeking. They will do way more extreme sports than we probably ever did. Honestly, I think Josh's first weekend in Wyoming, he messaged me and said, "Mom, I'm going cliff diving." And I was like, oh, so anyway, so yes. And then the last thing is tolerance is a super high value in these emerging adults. So many of these emerging adults tend to have more of a post-Christian worldview, which means that they no longer see the world through Christian values. So not all, but a lot of them do, and we probably see this. The digital world shapes a lot of this in their minds, and so if they're spending more time on their phone than they are in church or reading their Bible, it's really easy to fall into that, and then we see this moral decline. It's becoming more and more evident in many, and with this moral decline, parents are faced with what we call the cringe factor. So you can put the next point up there. And the cringe factor is all of those things that are happening with young adults that make us parents go,
Make us cringe.
Cringing. So like, for instance, pornography, cohabitation with their partners, not getting married, gender confusion, and drug and alcohol abuse. Those are probably 4 of the big primary ones that, just as a parent, when we see our young adults falling into some of these things that we never, ever, ever, ever taught them, it makes us like, it literally breaks our heart. I mean, literally, when our adult children start making decisions like that, and I'm sure some of you have experienced that, it breaks your heart, and so we're going to go into a little bit.
Yep,
Brian's going to go
we'll be talking
a little
about
bit
that.
into that, how we can maybe deal with some of these cringe factor issues. But for you parents who have younger kids, one of the best ways to reroute or at least have the best outcome on some of these issues, so for instance, pornography, cohabitation, or gender confusion, the most effective way to combat these issues is a good and healthy sex education when your kids are young, starting like 9 or 10 years old. Now, I know homeschool families, you might be able to get another year or 2 out of it, but eventually it's going to get around there, and you want them to hear it from you, not from their friends. And you want to develop that. And so one of the things I just want to show you all is this is one thing we did with all 3 of our kids when they were like 11 or 12. Oops.
By the microphone.
Sorry. So this is Passport to Purity. This is actually designed for the preteen age, and it's a weekend thing. There's like 6 CDs in here, and it covers all the uncomfortable subjects.
But somebody else is saying it.
But somebody else is
You're
saying
just like,
it.
can you believe
so
what?
You just like you put the CD in, and
Yeah.
you just sit and you listen. And then when the part's over, you look at your child and like, do you have any questions?
Yeah. Can you believe what Dennis Rainey just said?
I know.
Well,
So,
yeah.
but the point of it is you're supposed to do a weekend retreat, and you do fun things in between all the CDs. And I remember I listened to probably the most embarrassing one, driving down to the Dells with Abby. And I remember as he's talking, she's sinking lower and lower into her seat. And when it ended, I looked at Abby. I'm like, well, do you have any questions? She's like, nope. So, but they really go into all the details of the birds and the bees and everything. And the whole point of it is to open this communication up with your kids about relationships, about sex, about pornography. They even cover pornography, and they're just to put it out there so they know, so they have a plan.
Couple questions, Emmaus. You can't drink when you're on duty here.
What?
We have 2.
This guy's some roller skates.
All right, we got right here. No, Emmaus, I love you. I just got to give you a hard time. So first Nova, and then back here. All right.
I'm really glad you said that, because I felt like the Lord was literally speaking to me about this a couple weeks ago, and I told him, my husband, about this. Anyway, something happened on my phone, and because my son plays games on my phone, and they're very innocent games, but I saw something else. Anyway, long story short, I said, okay, we need to have this discussion, and I went to his mom, and I told her what I wanted to talk to my son about. Me and my husband, we're going to sit down with him when the girls are not around. And she said to me, don't you think that's a bit heavy? He doesn't need to know that kind of stuff. So we didn't have that conversation yet. And now I feel like, okay, maybe that really was God saying that, because I was just not even going to bother, you know.
Pray about it.
Yep, pray about it. And then the one thing I do want to mention with the Passport to Purity is it's really intended boys and dads, moms and daughters.
Yeah.
Because I never did this with my boys.
No.
No, and Brian never did this with Abby.
Yeah.
Though Brian is very verbal about relationships with Abby, you know, it's important that man-to-man relationship there and that woman-to-woman. So.
Yep. Go ahead.
Did you find that opened up for the opportunity for future conversations?
Absolutely.
That
So
was the point.
the daughter that
Okay.
turns 16 tomorrow, we agreed on some things back when she was 10, and she still agrees to those things.
Okay,
And
that's
so
good. That's
we
the
look.
goal, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. That carries on.
Also, I wanted to suggest maybe for those with younger kids, there's a really good book out there, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, Junior. I haven't read the not junior one, but it's just talking to kids about pornography at a young age. And the word pornography is in there once, but it's basically putting it in their context. What's a good picture? What's a bad picture? So good pictures, bad pictures, junior for the little kids.
Excellent.
Good.
Okay. Excellent. All right.
Just attest to the Passport to Purity, and now my daughter, who's Abby's age, she comes to me with all sorts of questions. It just felt like it completely opened it up, and I just said, I am here for you. I don't want you to learn this stuff on the, in the school, it's from your other friends who may or may not have it right. I will
Right.
tell you whatever. We have talked about so many things, and she will come to me with these questions, and I'm like so grateful that she is talking to me about it, because I never talked to my mother about anything,
Yeah.
and I just wanted to have a different relationship, so that Passport to Purity is really great.
Yeah.
Cool, good.
Okay, Heidi Schaefer.
Yeah, I want to advocate. It's really good to talk to them early, even when they're little, like 3 or 4 or 5, just talking about basic things so that they're not embarrassed, and it makes it much easier. And there's this, I think Family Life has a 4-book series too as they get older, but it's terrific because then you have more, you can talk about it when they get older.
I think I'm next then, huh? Okay, excellent. Okay, next point. So again, that's culture. So who are these young people? What kind of culture did they grow up in? The things that make us cringe, and then the faith factor. So it is, without going into a lot of statistics, which you can all find out, it's not surprising. None of us are surprised that this next generation, I think they call it Generation Z right now, is not going to church as much as previous generations. I can't say, go back forever, because I don't, 100, 200 years, I'm not sure, but they're going to church less. They're doing, like Carrie said too, about like we're post-Christian almost. And so that's just what they're growing up in. They're growing up in almost, it's turning into, at least culture-wise, a post-Christian sort of society. But that doesn't change anything of the power of the Holy Spirit, what they can do in their lives. And so biblical truths are still biblical truths. We still want that influence over them. So as parents, we have a lot that we can do about this. Also, churches can help. This church here, just if you are in it for any length of time, you'll recognize that young people are very accepted, that we promote young adult things. If there's young adults on stage in worship sometimes, there's young adults all over the place. And I think they're here because they know that for several reasons. One is that we accept them. The other thing with young adults is they want a real Jesus, not either side. So they don't want the boring, traditional, methodical thing, and then they don't want something that's just fake. So they want the real experience with a real saving Jesus, and that is appealing to all ages. That doesn't go away when you become a young adult. So they want a real experience with a Jesus-centered faith. And then we want to have an intergenerational community. So we want all ages active in a church, and young adults want that. They don't want to be like, pointed out, but they want everybody to be included. So the faith factor, that's kind of the faith factor, which it's not real good, but yet there's plenty of hope. It's not hopeless by any means. And then the fourth and final point on this one is, what can a parent do? First of all, meet them where they're at. Whatever your young adult wants to do, if it's not morally wrong, go ahead and do that. Even if you don't have that interest, meet them, experience what they like to do, and that's where you can make that connection. Become a student of their culture, which we just went over that, so hopefully we're a little bit more aware of their culture. And then the last thing is, and this is out of his book, Parent with Awe, which is affection, warmth, and encouragement. So be the parent that other young adults, that their friends want to be around. If you like baking, and if you're a mom who likes to bake things, have every time they come over, make sure there's lots of food. Clear out if 3 of them pile into the living room, have conversation with them, but then at the same time, give them some room. Just be that affectionate warmth and encouragement. And then 1 Thessalonians 5:16 and 8 says, "Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, in everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus." So that's what a parent is to do, is to pray about everything, but be rejoicing in what he has already done in your life and in the life of your family. So that is maybe, in addition to the awe-thing, that is critical too. All right, that's it for principle 3. Is there any questions on any of that with today's culture and where our kids are at? Kent, can we have a microphone? Kent, right here. Sorry. Thank you, Emmaus.
One of the things that I think we're struggling with right now is the other influences. We didn't realize as much in the public school how much our kids were being negatively influenced by their teachers and, in that environment.
Yeah.
I think school choice is a good thing, and I think there's some good choices out there for other things but I think we started seeing that more now that they're in college, and they're being even more influenced by atheists with PhDs.
Yeah.
And that's the struggle that we're dealing with right now, and we're getting the pushback from that.
Yeah.
Anything you can speak to on that?
By the time they go to college, they really have to be able to defend their faith, and it has to be real to them. And so that is probably the most vulnerable year of a person's entire life, is when they leave home and hit, whether it's a workplace where it's a rough and tough, crude environment, or it's that college professor, like you say, who's very influential. And so I would say at this point, you're looking at going back to that last point where meet them where they're at. So wherever they are in their life, be there and be participating in what they want to participate in. You're already kind of a student of what they're doing, and then just be that parent with awe. Be affectionate, be warmth, be encouraging. They say they'll forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you make them feel. So make them feel like you're important to them, and then just keep praying for them. It's a long ride, right? They're only, say, 20. It's not over. And so give it time, do what you got to do, and trust the Lord. Just keep praying, keep modeling Christ's love to them.
Prayer is huge. It really is. I mean, you look at when some of you guys introduced yourselves today and you said, my parents did an awful job raising me. Well, look at you today.
Letting me go. They didn't say raising. Letting me go.
Letting me go. Do you know what I mean? So, like, just because, you know what I mean? So it's like, just because you had a rough start as a young adult doesn't mean your life is, like, doomed forever, because some of you guys may have had rough starts. I know I did. I know Brian did. I mean, we all, I started personally. I had no idea what I was doing. And I can say so many times over, by the grace of God, I'm like literally here today. Because I did not come to the Lord until I was in my 30s. So I was nowhere, I had no relationship with the Lord all the way through even though I went to CCD and I got baptized and I got First Communion and confirmation, I did all that, I had no relationship with the Lord. And so there is hope with that. And so like Brian said, you just want to go back to those points and spending time with them, having fun with them. Being intentional about having fun with them is really key. You just want them to, like Brian said, you just want them to remember how you made them feel you were with them, because that is the love of Christ shining through us. And if we can show the love of Christ in everything that we do with them, that doesn't necessarily mean we're accepting some of these cringe factor things. We're accepting the fact that they have gender identity issues or alcohol. I mean, that's tough. So that goes back to get yourself a support group, because you need to surround yourself with people who are going through that same stuff, because you can't be venting to your kid about this. You can vent to your friend about it, but you've got to pull yourself together and be this encouraging, caring parent when you're with them. Not necessarily affirming what they're doing, but affirming them as a person themselves.
That's right. Anything else?
What'd you do with, or teach them about drugs and alcohol? I just did the set a good example. I don't drink.
Yeah.
Not because I'm morally opposed to someone having a beer. It's just I don't do it, and alcoholism runs in my family, so I just don't think it's a good idea.
I think that's really what we did. We just modeled it.
Okay.
And they had the DARE program in the school, which they, scared them to death about drunk driving and stuff. And otherwise, we really modeled it. 1 or 2 conversations, that was it.
Yeah, and I know I've probably had more conversations with the boys than you have in their college years, because we both come from down lines of alcohol being a generational curse in our families.
Yep.
His family
Yep.
and mine. And I will tell my kids over and over again, I have never seen anything good come out of alcohol.
Yeah, but it's just modeling it. I mean, and so we really have had no problems with it. It's been very nice.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right, next 4, principle 4. So just, this is a note to,
Where are we?
we got 10 minutes each at the most.
Okay.
All right,
Okay.
I start out.
You start.
They will never know how far town is if you carry them on your back. All right, point 1. Are you enabling your adult child or helping? Here's the definition of enabling. Enabling shields people from experiencing the full impact and consequences of their behavior. So enabling creates an environment where your young adult can do things, can be comfortable doing things that are bad for them, right? So are we enabling them or are we helping them? It is natural to protect, but we must break the habit of enabling. Here's an author, John Townsend. I took this out of the book. He put it this way: there is a right way to live, and it is the hard way. It is work, but it works. Next point.
Me?
Yep.
Okay, so the next point is negotiating boundaries. If you guys have ever heard of the Boundaries books, I would highly recommend them. They have a whole series of them: boundaries in marriage, boundaries with kids. They actually have a boundaries with teens, and then they have just in general boundaries. So if you're looking for guidance with teens, boundaries with teens. If you're looking for boundaries with young adults, I would just get the boundaries one. They have a new revised edition that has digital stuff in it too. So you can find those online, and I have it written actually at the back of your packet too, the references. So anyway, with that being said, the things you want to remember is you want to move all the responsibilities that you've taken for them and just give it to them. You just want to give it to them. And like I said, the sooner you start in life, 13, 14, start giving them more and more responsibilities. It's going to be so much easier when they're 18 or 19. And some kids are more responsible than others. It's like in their blood. And some kids are not responsible at all, and it's in their blood. So some take longer to get going than others. So the one thing is, number 1, they are responsible for their own outcomes and consequences. The Bible says you reap what you sow, right? So for instance, if they get a speeding ticket, they got to pay for it. If they wake up late for a job, they're probably going to get in trouble. You don't want to be calling them, making sure they're awake. If they don't do their laundry, this happened to David a couple weeks ago. We promised we would mention their names, but it's just so fun picking on our kids when they're not here. You have no underwear. Okay, so that's just what happens. Here's another one, and this is a really hard one, especially if you're a controlling one that just wants the best for your kids. You can't want it more than they want it. If you really want them to go to college, and they don't really want to go to college, there comes a point where it's like,
It's fine. They're not called to go to college.
they're not called to go to college. You can try everything in your power to get them there, but if they don't want to go, they're not going to go. If they don't want to, if they're living on their own and they want to eat Doritos for breakfast and Cheetos for lunch and ice cream for dinner, you can't say anything. Like, they got to want to eat healthy, like, no matter what. If you go to their apartment, it's a total mess, it's fine. They've got to want a clean apartment. Like, you can't be cleaning it every time you go there. So they just got to remember that. It's a really good point. When the pain of remaining the same is greater than the pain of change, that is when they will change. So, yep. if you've got a kid who's not organized and they lose some really important things, it's going to motivate them eventually to start getting organized. And the list can go on of all the things that bad decisions. The question is how many times they're going to make this decision before it gets so painful that they decide to change. So it's the pain that's actually going to make them change. And if you guys remember all that, there's generally, when we get uncomfortable, that's what makes us change. And that's how they're going to change as well. So failure is the best teacher. We said that one already, didn't we?
Yep, very good. Okay,
Okay.
next point. And this somewhat depends on if they're at home or not, but if they're out in their own living, this would be somewhat different. But you need to express your expectations to your young adults clearly. That could mean you have to be productive, which means you're in school or you have a job or you've signed up for the military, something. You have to be productive. You have to be financially responsible. You know, if you're gonna live at home for a while as a young adult, then you fine, but you have to be. You can't be broke and using our car with our gas and stuff like that. So you have to be financially responsible. Expectations would be clearly our moral standards in our home. You know, you're a young adult, you can do what you want, but in our home, these are our rules. And so if you want to be here, you just have to be clear on that. So express your expectations clearly and then have consequences that follow up. So if they want to live at home for a while, if they're saving up money or they're commuting for some job or some school, then fine. But again, if they don't do these things, then they have the right to move out. If you have assigned to them a certain responsibility within the home and they just refuse to do it, well then they have earned the right maybe to move out. It's up to them. If they have to help out with chores or whatever, that would be up to them. So just express whatever your expectations are, and especially if they're at home, make it clear so that there's not this ambiguous area. And then we have to, consequences do not equal punishment. So as soon as they become young adults, there's no more punishment. So punishment is something we do to change a behavior. We're not looking at, I'm not looking at changing our young adults' behavior anymore. We're looking at consequences that they have earned. So the consequence will be the teacher of the behavior change. We're not looking anymore at punishing because that is not my responsibility to change their behavior anymore. So, all right, and then lastly is come up with a plan.
Yeah, and a lot of this has to do with for kids who are maybe still at home or still relying on you financially. So developing an action plan means basically, let's look at the verse Proverbs 29:18, where there is no vision, people perish. So the first thing you want to say, if your kids are not where they need to be yet, where do you want to be? Where do you want to be, in a year from now? So if they're living at home, for instance, and they're still in school, sometimes they're a little bit more limited on finances. And so, then we'd expect more of them when they're living at home. If they're living on their own, a lot of times you can't expect a lot more on them. But if you're financially supporting them, you can still speak into their life. Like I know, for our kids, I think there's we will support them up to a certain point as long as they keep their grades B's and higher. Anything beyond that, they've got to pay for, that kind of thing. So that's an idea of something you could do. So an action plan is starting out, beginning with an end in mind. Okay, Johnny, you're going to be graduating in the fall. What's your plan? What is that going to look like? And then you want to come up with an action plan, and actually, you want them to come up with it. That's the key. They need to own the plan. So you want to say, okay, where do you want to be? What's your ultimate goal? Then you want to set deadlines. Okay, what date do you think you can get this done by? When do you think you can have enough money saved up to move out? When do you think you can find a job? When do you think you'll find an apartment? Set deadlines. Now the deadlines, of course, it might depend on whether they get a job, if they get that job or whatever. It can be flexible, but you want to set a date of when you want them moving out. And then the final thing is establish consequences if they don't follow through with the action plan, because the whole goal is to get them out and independent. And many times, if you ask them, how are we going to get you out and independent, they might come up with this own amazing plan. Now, some kids might not be able to come up with a plan, and then you can work with them on that, but it's really important to come up with an action plan on how are they going to be completely independent in a certain time frame. And write it down. Actually, in the book, it did say you can write it down as a contract. Sometimes it can be verbal, but they said a family has never, ever regretted setting an action plan of when they're ultimately going to be officially gone and on their own, even if it's financially, too. Okay, do you have a living agreement? Okay, all right. Good, so they start with goals, you write them down, then you set dates of when you want these goals to happen, and then you, and it's, that way you at least know where you're going, heading back to that verse. Yes, yep, if you have it written down,
Yep.
so some kids might need it written down, and then if they don't follow through with it, then you've gotta figure out what is the consequences for not meeting that goal at the time you wanted, so.
And we parent with grace, so,
We do.
you know, I mean, when I say we, I mean as a group here. And so we are willing to adjust that when there's, you know, when they're giving effort or whatever, you know, things change. And so it gives you an option. Exactly. Yep.
And that goes back to creating boundaries. If you understand the concept of boundaries in the boundaries book, if you create the boundaries, they're to keep everybody safe, including you, because you don't want to be upset at your kids. You got to set the boundaries.
All right, any questions on this topic? We got time for questions if you have any, but any questions on, you will never know how far if they're not letting them get there on their own. Okay. Skip our questions. All right. Number 5, principle 5. Your job is to move them, again, and what the author does, and what our hope for you really is that you're interested and you just go, you buy the book, put it on your shelf, refer to it when you need to it. So the author does repeat some things, but it's just like when you read in the Bible and, oh yeah, I read that in this other book. You know, it's like, yeah, it really solidifies it. So I think he's trying to solidify some things, but his next principle is your job is to move them from dependence to independence. So I would say that most parents would agree that we want healthy adult relationships and we want our kids independent and on their own. There is this term, boomerang kid. Typically that's somebody who may have left, did some life experience, and now they're back. It's not considered unusual anymore. It used to be a very odd thing, and now it's sometimes it's circumstantial because of school. It makes sense, I guess, if they're in college and then they come back home until they find a job and then back out again. Some people get laid off and come back home, but the term boomerang kids is something that they consider to be normal. When we grew up, most of us, that was not normal. So the first thing you need to do to move them from dependence to independence is land the helicopter, and we got to make this fast.
Yes, I know. Parents who hover over their kids' lives, okay, you're doing their laundry, you're cooking for them, you're cleaning for them, you're giving them money all the time, you need to, like, stop. So that's kind of, we've already kind of covered that a little bit. They actually call that the helicopter parent. They keep coming down, taking care of their child, and then leaving. And so you want to just make sure you don't want to be cooking for them, cleaning for them, or doing laundry for them on a regular basis. Also, when they are struggling to find a solution, okay, I'm a problem solver, I need to, like, stop, because I need to say, well, how do you think we can fix this problem? So you want to throw that right back in their court and let them figure it out. It's part of growing them as an adult. And then don't pay their way. Minimum, they said at a minimum, the book said young adults should be paying for their gas, food, and clothing at a minimum. When in school, a lot of times there's less money going around, but if they got a full-time job, they can be paying for pretty much everything.
Okay, great. Next point. And please, questions, if you got them, raise your hand. I'll go through this quick, but it's good. The importance of individualism. That means the child needs to see himself as a distinct person from mom or dad. So individualism is becoming a distinct person from mom and dad. Matthew 19:5, got it there. A man will leave his father and mother and be united with his wife, and the two will become one. So this takes effort on both mom and dad and the child. It takes effort on both. How to help in this process? Avoid strong criticism and judging. This actually paralyzes their growth. Change your role from a parent-child to adult-adult. I think that's where that friend thing was going. We're adult to adult now, not parent to child. Cheer on their progress. We're like a cheerleader for them and the things that they're doing well at. Allow your child to control the amount of time that you spend together. That's kind of an interesting one, but it's true. Offer to be available, but really allow them to control the time you spend together. Don't accommodate them. And then lastly is encourage and hope and model Jesus to them. So even if they're not walking like you would want them to walk, model Jesus to them, encourage them in hope, and all is not lost. All right, and then final on this one real quick.
View emerging adulthood as a rite of passage. So the question is, how can we communicate to our child that we recognize and respect that they are becoming an adult? Well, a man is not a man until the father says so. So we want to make it a point to celebrate the milestones in their life, starting at maybe a driver's license and then going up to graduating high school and then going up to graduating college, or maybe their first apartment, or maybe their military, if they enlist in the military. You want to make a special point to celebrate those milestones in life, because that is what actually helps them recognize that you recognize that they're an adult. It's those steps of becoming an adulthood. So
Okay.
engagements, marriage, first babies, all that fun stuff. So that's a pretty easy one,
Yeah.
having parties.
And
right?
again, like what we talked about, have fun with these kids, these adults. Have fun. So let's celebrate. Let's be there at every time there's an opportunity that they want us at some fun stuff. Is there any questions on this one? Your job is to move them from dependence to independence. Any questions? Nothing? Okay. Has anyone experienced a win or a fail of an adult child that they would like to share? Has anybody had it work out real well? Or a crash and burn? Maybe it's not your crash and burn, maybe it's your sisters or brothers that you want to tell us about. Joe, Emmaus, can we get a microphone to Joe? Joe Olson, you want to raise your hand? Emmaus might not know everybody's name.
I feel that it worked out real well with my daughters when they got married.
Okay.
I just took that as a milestone to elaborate to them and their husbands to be that at that point we were going to be hands off.
Mm-hmm.
She belongs to you now, and she's your responsibility and not ours anymore.
Yeah.
And we're going to keep our mouths shut, but we'll be here if you need us.
Beautiful. Excellent. Excellent.
And it's really been a great transition to being friends and talking to each other like adults.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Excellent. Anything else? Anybody else had a win or knows of somebody who had a fail? Becky.
Kind of a win-fail. So we've learned with our, I won't say about it anyway, one of our sons, as an adult, having expectations, or for him, the word expectation or rules was, again, very parenty. And so we've come to the point of saying we're going to sit down and have agreements. This is what you're agreeing to. So it's a little more responsible or an adult-like for him when he doesn't step up to his agreements. You agreed to whatever it is, versus we expected you to, because again, my expectations or our parents' expectations are always higher than our own probably. So the agreements has been a win so far.
Okay. Good. Excellent.
Yeah, little
Excellent.
steps.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. All right. We'll move on to the final principle, and that is, what do you do when your grown child, violates your rules? So we need to keep conveying our love without giving approval. And if we go to point 1, even good parents have children who make bad choices. So what this does is this just puts doubt in our mind about everything we've ever done. We just start looking back and say, what if I would have done this? What if I would have done that? What I'd like to encourage you to do is Luke 15. We're not going to read it, but Luke 15 is a chapter of hope for prodigal children. It first starts out by the parable of the lost sheep. Jesus, he'll leave the 99 and he'll seek out your son or daughter that is missing. And then it moves to the parable of the lost coin, where the woman who loses the coin will rip the entire house apart, sweep everything until she finds the coin. And then it ends with the prodigal son story. So Luke 15, in my mind, is a chapter that I would have bookmarked if I had a son or a daughter who was an arrow that was adrift, who had walked, and particularly had walked away from the Lord, because the Lord will continue to pursue them. And when they come back, He will welcome them back, and we need to be ready to welcome them back. This is a quote from the book. been through a lot of pain in my life, but I've never felt heartbreak like I have through the poor choices of my kids. So it's a heartbreaking thing when our kids make poor choices, but it is a redeemable thing. In fact, God isn't, that he is in the redeeming business. He is in the redeeming business. Never forget that. And please refer to Luke 15 for encouragement with that. Okay, next point.
And then there's a few points here I'll just go over briefly. Offer your child tough love. So an example of that would be not allowing, for instance, if you've got a child who's using drugs, they can't move back home until they seek treatment. That would be an example of tough love. Tough love stops problematic behavior and encourages positive growth. The next thing is don't bail them out. Their financial crisis does not become your financial crisis, along with all sorts of other crises in their lives. So we just want to make sure we're not bailing them out. We do not want to be a one-topic parent. If they already know how you feel about the topic, do something different. Let's go out to dinner once a week and let's talk about the other things about her life. Get to know her beyond the one thing that's actually breaking your heart. And you can actually develop a relationship coming in from that angle rather than spending all the time in that one thing that drives you crazy about their choice in life. And I'm saying this like it's easy. I guarantee you it's not. It's not. And I'm sure some of you have been through it or you've seen people go through it. I know I've seen people go through it, and it is hard. But you have to die to yourself. You can't be that controlling parent. You wanna love on them as much as you can and try to find the other good parts of them and rise those up. Don't dump your frustrations on your child. If there's something that's bothering you about your child, if they already know how you feel about it, vent to a friend and go back and love your child. It's okay to vent, but not to your child about those issues. And the one thing is when we go back to finding support for yourself, if you've got a child who's struggling with bigger issues, talking like addictions, bipolar disorders, suicide attempts, self-injury, eating disorders, clinical depression, if they're in trouble with the law a lot, that is beyond your pay grade. You really need to seek professional counsel on that, you personally, and if your child is willing to seek it as well, yes. But don't try to be the super mom and think that creating just some boundaries with kids who have way bigger issues is gonna cut it, because it won't. It's too much for you. It's beyond your pay grade. There's professionals out there that go to school to help navigate you through those sorts of things.
And your kids help
And
your
help
kids
your
get
kids
help.
navigate through. So, I think.
And then last one is
and then the last one is so important.
release them to God's care.
Release them to God's care.
Yeah, and let's go right into the third point, because really that's the third and final point, is when your adult child strays from the faith, just maintain a climate of openness and grace. Again, openness and grace. They don't have to know, we don't have to approve, we just have to continue to love them. Refuse to beat yourself up. You know, right? The perfect father had the first sinful man was Adam. He had the perfect father. So don't beat yourself up. Free choice is free choice. Free will is free will. And just be there to continue to influence them. We want to continue to influence them throughout the rest of their lives, and then eventually have influence and spend time with our grandkids. So, yeah, I would just say that remember the biblical principle, and that's the last one we got there, Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. So we'll wait, right? We'll wait for a 20-year-old. We'll trust God. We'll trust God. We'll wait for him or her to come back if they've walked away. So we'd like to open up to any questions you have about anything, this final topic or anything else. We put a lot of information out, I know, but we had just an hour and a half to get it in, and what we hope to do is give you guys a lot to think about, and then resources. Maybe you're just processing a lot of it, but there's good resources out there. There's pastors here who would love to help, elders here who have walked this, and others. So yes, may I ask, can we get it?
Yes. Yes, so if you want to hit the next, is that Sarah? Yes, so welcome to adulting. This is a great high school graduation gift. This could be like one of your last opportunities to speak everything into their life without actually doing it. I actually heard this on Focus on the Family, and
In the mic. But yeah,
and
it's good.
it's a great book. It actually is perfect for teens, late teens, going into college, even young adults. Like I laid this out, and I had a young adult living with me at the time, and I noticed she had gotten halfway through the book in probably 3 days. And it talks about all sorts of neat things. So this one, I think you can get them on Amazon or ChristianBook.com. But this is a great one to give to your adult child. And then there was another one. Then the additional parent resources, I talked about the boundaries. The regular book, and then the boundaries with teens would probably be the most applicable ones, but there's lots of other ones too. So those are the primary resources that we've used over the years, and are kind of all in our study here today. So
Anything else? Nothing else? Everybody's got it down? Or was it too much? Was this too much information too fast? Okay, all right. Okay.
I encourage you to read the book, though. I mean, we
Yeah.
each read it twice.
Yeah.
I learned something new every time.
It's a game changer.
Yeah, it was a game changer.
Okay. Well then, with that, I'll close in prayer. And remember, next week, if you've got a child in preteens or youth, they're having a dinner, and then it's like meet your youth leader night. So feel free to go over there and meet the youth leader if you've got a preteen or a youth. And then the week after that, classes start up in both New London and Waupaca. So come back the week after next for a full set of adult classes. Here it's it's apologetics. What's relational apologetics, led by the Belkys, and Pastor Jim is teaching 1 Timothy in New London. What's that? 1 and 2 Timothy. Okay, thank you, pastors. So please take a break next week if you don't have your kids in preteens and youth, and then come back the following.
And also the kids program too. So we will have kids program next week.
Yeah.
So the kindergartners all the way up through the high schoolers will have programs. So.
All right, well, I'll pray, and then we can be dismissed. Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you for this teaching from Jim Burns. Lord, I thank you for his work in the ministry that he has. Lord, I pray that the truths that you have presented here, Lord, that the people, your people who have heard it, Lord, that we could remember and take things from this, Lord, that we could avoid some of the problems of our adult children that we would have with them, or maybe there's things right now that we can correct that we're doing, Lord. And so I just pray that this information would be useful, and that we could have families that are in unity, and that we can grow together, separate from each other, but yet still together. So be with us tonight. Bless these people. Bless them and keep them safe as they get home. In Jesus' name, amen. Yes.